Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. So, lately, we've been hearing from so many international students about how to really stand out when applying to top tier universities in the US. So, today we are doing just that. And joining me all the way from Dubai is Kevin, one of our incredible counselors here at InGenius Prep, and also a former admissions officer who's read thousands of applications from students all around the world. So, he's really helped students get into places like MIT, Brown, UChicago, Cornell, and many more. So he knows exactly what catches the admissions officer's eye. So, Kevin, it's so great to have you here.
Thanks, Jillian. So happy to be here finally.
So, before we dive in, Kevin, of course, could you briefly share a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you do here at Ingenious Prep?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin. And like Jillian so beautifully said, I'm a former missions officer here within Genius Prep. And my role really is to give strategy to our students to help them see their applications from a different lens. And if you look at an analogy, let's say at an airport and you're sitting on your plane, I'm the air traffic controller who is helping guiding your plane to its eventual point to take off, which is what we would look to as going off to university. Julian rightfully mentioned I've worked at a few different universities in the US, one like Cornell, one like UC Berkeley, but then some at a different end of the spectrum, like Bentley University, University of Virginia, which are slightly different in terms of how they admit students and also how they review applications. So I'm super excited to be here and to tell you a little more about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm really excited about today's episode because I used to be an international student as well, but I never really did any research on like how to really complete my profiles. I just did it
Mhm.
myself, basically. So let's just start with the overall admissions experience and from the global perspective. So, obviously, you've reviewed applications from a wide range of students from countries like Canada, UAE, Australia. So, when you look across those regions, what kinds of differences or patterns did you notice in how these students from these different regions present themselves in their applications?
I would say there's definitely a variety of perspectives that we see, not even just across countries, but within countries and even within regions of a country, like cities or states or something like this. Because all the different school systems around the world will offer something slightly different. Really interesting example, there are some school systems out there that have mandatory community service hours. American diploma high schools tend to be one of these, but there are some others too. So even if you live in a country that doesn't really have a lot of community service, or maybe it's not a part of the society, those students from that school or those schools will have those hours in their application. And I think there's certainly quite a variety of what we see from students, but I think the underlying thing that we want to see from students, and maybe we don't see, is the cultural element. Because when an international student comes onto the campus, we're looking to see how will they benefit our campus? How will our campus grow because of the student being there? And some of the cultural elements are things that we would love to see in some applications, and we don't always see that. Now, that might be for various reasons, but that's one thing that we would love to learn more about and to know more about what makes up the student from that perspective, because that's part of their values and their ethics and how they view the world.
I love that. I think a lot of students outside the US really struggle with how do I make my story make sense to an American admissions officer, right?
Mhm.
What's your advice for helping them translate their experiences in a way that actually connects, especially when it comes to their personal statement, for example? Like, how can I resonate with a US admissions officer, especially from international applicant point of view?
Being authentic is so key. Sometimes we see students try so hard to write the perfect essay and to write it with the most catchy language or different things. By doing that, more often than not, the admissions officer is kind of confused at what is being written, or they don't quite understand, especially if there are big words that most people wouldn't even use, that it's like reading at the source at some point. And I would say really be authentic, really be clear as well. So maybe to explain that a little bit further, international students sometimes say they know what I'm saying or they'll understand what I'm talking about. And I said, that might not work. You never know who's going to be reading your application. And in some cases, that person might have read already 100 today. So we have to give them a little bit more of a guidance in terms of what we want to say and how we want to say it.
Going back to their applications, how do you weigh achievements that are unique to their local environment versus GPA or standardized tests, which the US student would be more familiar with?
So local environment, that's really the first line of evaluation that we do, or in my case, it did. Let's say we take Indonesia, for example, and the student is studying at a school in Jakarta. We will look at the school first and then Jakarta second. And that's how we would look at the evaluation. Now, this is at some universities, but that's how we would evaluate the student. And so, in that local context, we would love to know more about what the student is doing in their school, what the student is doing in their community, because even though they're in a massive city like Jakarta or a country with so many people like Indonesia, this is where the student can really showcase that side of things. And I can guarantee you the admissions officer won't know everything about everywhere. And so showing that intimate side of a student is really going to be valuable.
From reading so many applications over the years, what is that one subtle thing that makes an application really stick with you after reading, like you said, hundreds a day? What do US admissions officers look for in international applicants that's different from the US domestic students?
I would say, what is that student's true and honest conviction to come to the US so many miles away from home, come and study whatever major they've chosen, come and pursue whatever activities they like, and really thrive on campus? And that thriving part is the part that is hard to put into words for students, but there are so many universities in the world. There are so many opportunities for students. Why do they want to come to this campus so particularly? And that's hard to also highlight when you live 8,000 miles away from Cornell, for example. But that part is really key. And more often than not, the students that we would, let's say, not accept from these universities, the reason would be because we don't know how they would do well on our campus. We don't know how they would thrive on our campus. How would the university's values, ethos, mission statement, whatever you wish to call it, how would that align with the student?
Have you read an application from an international student where it stuck with you till today? And what was their story like, their essay? Do you remember any of those?
Yeah. There's one story that I have not forgotten, and it's probably been like 10 years at this point. This student, she was living in a country and living in a place where she couldn't go to school. She wasn't allowed to go to school. And she was so motivated to learn that she would seek out other ways to learn. And she would explain these other ways, let's say learning in a different format, learning in a different style. And she had to find a solution to what the country was really saying is you can't learn. And you can't learn this in particular, like certain subjects, for example. And she explained that in her essay. I couldn't go learn because of what the local policies were. And I wanted to learn this subject, and that wasn't for me. And she sought out a solution to that, and she sought out other opportunities, which she detailed. I can't give you the details for the sake of privacy, but she really explained how there was a challenging situation completely out of her control, completely out of her ability to rectify, and how she then acted upon that to achieve her goals. And the way that it was presented was also really important because she did not present it as an accusation. She did not present it as a sort of, I'm so unfortunate, I can't do this, sort of a woe is me like scenario. The opposite. She said, this is my reality. And this is what I've done to make my reality different. And it's that part that really stuck with me. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying that this is so sad. I'm saying this is what I have to live with. And this is what I've done. So that way I'm ready to go and move on with my life, basically.
A lot of students actually send messages online or DMs asking about what should I write about my essays? Should I write about a time when I was sick or anything dramatic? My life is so boring. I don't know what to write about. Do you have any like advice on students who are struggling with writing about essays?
Yeah, essays are challenging. And I would say that the biggest myth with essay writing is the idea of trauma dumping. Right? It's like, you don't have to tell us when you were sick. You don't have to tell us when you moved and you missed your friends. We understand that that's a part of how life is. My tip for students is write about something that truly showcases who you are. It can be anything. I've had a student write about their grocery list. I've had a student write about their dog. I've had a student write about how writing is hard. And this essay is hard. And that was really cool because it was like this double entendre type thing. Writing is difficult for me. I prefer to speak to a person. But this is what I've learned from writing this essay and doing all of these things. So that was quite interesting. I felt like that was a unique angle to take on an essay that often gives students so much stress. It's really that authenticity and also talk about what the student really and truly enjoys in the world, because this is their chance. We can see that they like math or engineering or whatever in an activities list. We can see why they want to do this from a supplemental essay. But who is this student? Who is Kevin in this case, or who is Jillian? That's inherently not seen in an application at any point.
And what about the students who feel like they're not perfect on paper? Maybe
Mm.
their GPA is not top 5%, or they didn't start like a nonprofit at 16. How do you help them see that they still have something meaningful to offer, especially when their extracurriculars or projects are very different from the typical US activities?
Yeah, and this is where we have to do a little bit of kind of re-education with activities and say activities are what we have, but it's not what we make of them. You can have one activity and it be immensely powerful and transformative, engaging, multidimensional. And then there are small, let's say, connections from that activity into other things. And that can be greatly valuable. Not every student has access to the same activities. Not every student has access to school leadership, for example, or not every student has access to, like I mentioned before, community service. And so it's really about the student highlighting what they do, how they do it, and what they have access to. Of course, the latter is, I'm not saying go and give an expose on what activities are like in some part of the world, but it's more of showing that, yes, this is the best that I can do. This is what I did with it.
Can you think of an example maybe from the past where a student really stood out because of something unexpected they did with their activities, maybe something non-traditional, but maybe something very deeply personal to them or creative even?
I read an application which was really interesting. It was a few years ago, and it was this student who lived in a very, I don't want to say rural area because I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's what I took from it. And they noticed that in this area, there were quite a significant number of people who were suffering from water damage during the summer because of rains and the rainy season and different things. And she said there has to be some sort of way that we can amend this and we can fix this. And then she noticed that in another part of the year, water was so scarce. We had too much water and then too little water. Can we make this even? And basically, the one thing that she had done all year basically was help look at the water situation in her neighborhood and try to capture rainwater, find a way to filter it to make sure it's healthy for drinking or as healthy as possible, and then keep that water in a safe way for the time of the year when it is needed. And that was the main activity of the application. She's like, I don't have access to this at school. I don't have that at school, but I've done this. And that was really interesting because it was community based, yet it was not something that was given to her. It was not expected of her. It was just something she saw and said, let's create a problem. Let's create a solution to this problem.
Yeah. So she took it upon herself to find a solution and be
Yeah.
creative with it. So this next question I have, a lot of students actually message me for. It's how do I show fit for a US school or university if I've never visited the campus?
Yeah, this is the part that sounds silly, but it's the truth. Read the website, but not just read the website. Actually break down what is the website saying and what is it telling you. Because they're two different things. Reading something and understanding versus reading something to analyze and to question. And sometimes universities are very clear. One of my alma mater, we want this. Cool. That's easy. Very straightforward. But in other cases, most universities don't say that right away. And really connecting with what that university is valuing and looking for and what its campus is proud of and what it gives to students in terms of opportunities is immensely important because that shows student understands the university, understands the environment they're going into, and they can best tailor their application according to that. I'll give another example. And my other alma mater, if you will, is very clearly passionate about a, let's say, certain act of social engagement, which is great. And they view the world in that way, that it's a part of campus life. And no matter what, every application should have some element of that. But it takes a little bit more digging for a student to realize how important that is to the campus. And so it really is about taking that time, doing that research. If a student is, let's say, in grade 11 right now, the research should be started right now and really digging into each university. Because sometimes the student will be like, I don't really want to go there once they do that research. Or I don't know why I want to apply there. Besides, the name is really good and it's famous. Then is it the right fit? Is it going to be a place where a student will do well and really love there for 4 years or so? That I'm not so sure.
And I also think that a lot of universities have pages on YouTube and channels. And so they have their introduction video and all that. So I think they can also learn from there and other social channels too.
Yeah, that could definitely be one route. Although I will say social channels and even YouTube are marketing tools, which is not a bad thing. It's really informative. But sometimes students have to look a little bit deeper to get to some of them key things that admissions is looking for.
Yeah, that's very true. Now I want to get into the athletics or recruitment portion because I know were a top tennis recruit yourself. That's very interesting. Tell us more about that. And have you worked with any like international students who were student athletes and would want to apply to a US college?
Yeah. So my experience is a little bit different because I am American. I grew up in the States. I went to a tennis academy in the US and then ended up finishing high school where I'm from. And the university I went to was not as far away. So it was a little bit more local and a little bit more, let's say, it was easier for me to be recruited, let's put it that way. But for international students, yes, I worked with quite a few students over the years. And what I can say is the real important element is for the international student to be relatable because it's hard in a lot of cases to go through the recruiting process, talk to so many coaches, send so many videos and different things. But it's really how can this person be a team member amidst 8, 10, 15, 20, 40 people? That's what this coach wants to see because the coach is responsible for creating a team culture and creating an environment that is going to lead to success at a very high level of sports, a very, let's say, niche part of the community. It's not like a coach is able to give out 50 spots or whatever. It might be 5 or 2 per year. And so if that student can be relatable, can show how they be a part of the team culture, how they contribute to that dynamic, how they value team environments or teamwork, how they value leadership even without a title. These are all things that are beyond just the results and the points and statistics side of things.
Is there a difference when it comes to student athletes versus non-student athletes when it comes to the admissions process? I think you mentioned a bit about the video submissions and all that. Is there a video submissions for student athletes in particular?
Not for admissions. So it's slightly different. I call the athletic recruitment the first admissions and the university admission the second admission. So athletes have to go through 2 rounds of acceptance, if you will. The first one is done by the coach, and the coach will do this based on statistics, resume, performance, different skill sets. At the higher levels, like Division 1 and 2, where scholarships are involved, can the coach meet the student's need for a scholarship? Can they give that student a scholarship? If they can't and the student needs it, then it'll probably end there. And then, of course, meeting with the player and getting to know each other and building that rapport. And like I mentioned, culture building and fit and different things like this will be the first step of the first phase. And then generally a student athlete would go and visit campus. That's not always possible for international students. So then usually the second step of the first part, the first round, if you will, of the admission would be the coach taking the grades of the student and getting an initial evaluation from admissions. That usually takes place in the summertime, maybe a little before, depending on the division and how the school works, and also NCAA regulations, where the student will have an evaluation. It's just based on academics, that's all. And the admissions office will say yes, no, or maybe we don't know. That is usually told to the student athlete, this is happening and this is why. And the student athlete has a choice. They don't have to go through with this first part. They don't have to even apply in the end. So it's often done for a select number of student athletes, but maybe not the ones that will actually end up coming to the university. So once that first phase is finished, then the coach will give the feedback back to the student athlete and they bridge over into the actual completing of the application. And so that part is what we're talking about. It's all the different elements that go into the application that needs to be prepared and submitted generally by a certain time. But that's how the process should look like. So it's a little bit different. It's longer because relationship building takes years. So definitely a year. Any student in grade 11 should already be like really doing their networking. It takes over a year to conclude this process. And the ideal scenario, when I see a student, they should be finishing grade 10 by the time we start having a conversation.
It might be a little bit of a silly question, but if the student is not in the US and they want to be recruited into a US university, will they
Mhm.
have these conversation with the coaches online, like on Zoom or something like that?
Yeah. That's completely normal. Even students who are in the US will do the same thing. If a student lives in Arizona and they want to go to university in New Hampshire, then obviously they're not going to fly all the way up there. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, got it. So when you meet a student, what do you look for to figure out how to guide them through this whole process, especially for international applicants? It may be a little bit different and a little bit maybe more rigorous for them.
Yeah, I look beyond grades because in so many cases, international students are all really academically eligible. Great grades, doing well in school, amazing. But if that's commonplace, then I have to look past all of it and really get to see what is the student truly about, what really makes them interested in the world, whatever they're doing. I go right for that right away because at some stage, that's what's really going to drive our whole application. A student can study business at University A or University D. They might have two very different reputations or experiences or locations or whatnot. But if University D is the one the student is going to be eligible for, that's where they're going to build themselves and build their career. Even if University A is where they want to go, it's really about where are they going to fit it in the best they can? Where are they going to do well? And what do they ultimately bring to that table? Academics, we can make that quantification, but can we quantify what we are passionate about? Not always. So that's what I start right away with. Oftentimes, I don't even really ask about academics. In my meetings with students, I say, okay, I expect you to have good grades. If we don't, that's another conversation. But I really want to know, do you just really like to do?
Yeah, that's always the big question. And I think also passion projects are a big thing to get to know them more in terms of like their personality, their character, what they're interested in, right?
They're like the biggest ambiguity for students because we'll hear passion project and then the student is like, I don't know. And okay, none of us know everything, but it starts from really what do they just love to do. So for me, if I would pick a passion project, it would be tennis, 100%. I could talk about tennis all day. I could talk about everything tennis. I love it. I'll go on for hours. It could be everything from like the business of tennis to the gossip of tennis to the geography of tennis to the future of tennis, whatever it might be. But you can see I'm already going, giving out all these different things. That's the part that we really want to see. That's also the fun side. I think that's really where, if we can get the student talking, if I meet them, or if it's an application in their essay and get to that level, then we know that we understand really who they are, not what they want us to say.
I'm just having some flashbacks now of my teenage years and how I was so clueless about what I was interested in. I really have no idea what I want to do. And have you worked with students like this before, like where they absolutely have no idea what they're interested in? How would you guide them to find out what they're interested in or what they're passionate about?
Yeah, this is hard. This has been the evolution of applying to university is having it figured out. And I use this analogy, let's say, quite casually, but it'll make sense when I get to the end of it. If a student has it all figured out, they should go to the UK because they're going to study one thing for 3 years. That's it. If they don't really know where they want to go or they don't really know what they want to do, they have to explore. They have to try new things, see what's interesting, see what's not. And that's where the US is really special, but not everywhere in the US. It's really finding that environment that welcomes exploration. And so I tell students find that opportunity at a university or a college and just go and explore and see where that takes you. Find something that's relevant that may make the application, but just go and explore. I changed majors like 4 times and I had no problem with that. It was great. So really go and explore. And if the student's younger or they really are struggling with their application and saying, I just don't know what I want to do, then say, then what do you want to do in life? And they build upon that. The number of students that have said, I want to play video games turns into, I want to do, let's say, media or computer science or graphic design or creative writing for video games. There is the legal side to video games. There's the business side of video games. There's the marketing side to it. There's so many layers to it. And we not even talked about the actual device they're playing the game on or different things, the psychology behind it all. There are so many different things to it. And I just started with video games and we got 5 other tangents. So generally the student has something in there. They might get a little bit stressed about the academic element to it, but that's what I usually start with.
And finally, for our last question, looking ahead, how do you see the admissions landscape changing over the next few years, especially for international students who are wanting to apply to Ivy Leagues or highly selective schools? What shifts or trends should they be paying attention to?
I would say the biggest trend we're seeing, and this is something that has come out recently in the news as well, you can back it up with evidence, is the preparedness for university. That's a big question these days. How is the student ready from a emotional and maturity perspective, all the way to academics? How are they ready for university? The particular article that I read was about math and how are not ready for university because of math. Now, I'm not saying go and take more math classes because math is scary, but what I am saying, universities are going to be looking into more detailed elements of how the student is prepared for university. And that would need to shine through in an application. And so what might come of that, I think we'll see some more standardized testing come back into the conversation from more universities. I think we'll see more academic evidence checking. I think there'll be more of an expectation for stronger IELTS scores, or stronger TOEFL scores, stronger SAT scores, or having, let's say, an international board exam that's verified. I think that's really key across the board. As students will need to be showcasing these things and showing what they really know, because that's come to doubt as of late. I think further to that, what we're also seeing from universities and from their side of things is they immensely value international students. And there are some universities out there that will really put out their best efforts to bring in international students, whether it be with a scholarship, whether it be with an opportunity to come see campus, whatever it might be. So I encourage the students to apply and apply widely, because that can be where they might find an opportunity they never would have thought of before. So I think that those are some trends that we're going to be seeing, is really the value of international student and the preparedness for university.
Kevin, thank you so much for a thoughtful conversation. And I like that you reminded us of every student story is its own kind of journey. So hopefully we'll see you back on the podcast soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening.